Hello and welcome to this third video on how to teach using a thematic approach based on what we know about effective language learning. The focus of this video is on how to weave together a thematic unit. We have already seen what thematic units are, why they are important, and we've seen the basic components that put together a thematic unit. This video, we're going to look at each of those steps in creating a thematic unit that you will need to take. But the first thing I'm going to tell you is that this is not a series of recipes. It's a description of a process that teachers go through when they are creating a unit around a theme, right? Let's not forget the 6 T's components. I hope you've read the Stroller and Grabe article and that you bear them in mind at all times. We said in the first video that units can start with an overarching question or a big idea. So let's explore what a big idea is. We start with this theme, which is broad, completely broad, and which can have different things. My neighborhood, for example, typical theme. You may describe the neighborhood, you may describe, the students may create maps of the neighborhood, describe the shops in the neighborhood, or they could also try to find places of historical interest in the neighborhood, or places in the neighborhood that are more dangerous than others, and explore why the neighborhood is dangerous. So everything that a theme brings with it, you need to tailor-make for your students, their interests and their learning needs. What is a big question? Well, it's a general question that allows accommodation of multiple perspectives, multiple curriculum areas, multiple language functions, and other relevant unique contents. What do I mean by this? It allows the accommodation of different things. So a thematic unit is not just A, B, C, D. The different people may have different interests about the theme. A theme such as lifestyles, the environment, human rights, or technology, they could all share an overarching big idea, like what are some factors that positively and or negatively impact society and the world. And you may want to generate, according to your students' needs, one of these big idea questions, right? Or like the other one, how can we improve our planet? And then throughout the thematic units in the that you're going to do in the course, try to answer that question inside each of the thematic units. What the big idea gives us, right, is the possibility to look for answers to the question, but not to come up with the correct answer, right? Of course, answers are going to depend on how proficient the students are in the language, what the theme of the unit is, right? And what you have to teach. This is logical, right? Those are the constraints that you have. But think of these big ideas as being inside one particular thematic unit or being something that you negotiate with students throughout the course after you do your diagnosis. That is the first step. Once you have this question, right, you may consider sharing it with your colleagues. Big ideas are used in primary education in Uruguay, particularly in Programa de Segundas Lenguas, so that all the school works on the same big idea, right? You can do this as part of your coordination with other colleagues, and maybe you could all be exploring the same big idea in different groups with different students. The theme, how do you select the themes? Well, the themes or topics, they are the vehicle that help us make language meaningful, right? And they are also the vehicle through which students are going to learn content. Now, content for us has to do with learning facts, learning things about different topics, vocabulary, knowing the language, being able to read. If we look at this from the point of view of competencies, the content could be concepts, they could be skills, or they could be dispositions or attitudes. Like, for example, focusing on pronouncing the best I can, that is an attitude. As we've seen, themes may be very general, for example, lifestyles, or very specific, like famous people. And why do we insist on themes? Because they provide a context to do things with a language. Now, so the vehicle for language learning will be functions and no grammar items. Functions are things that we do with language, asking for specific information, advising, narrating, etc., etc. I have other examples there. Identifying specific information is another function. Now, the nice thing about themes is that they can be tallied to students' interests, to their learning needs, and also to the curriculum contents. So in your diagnosis at the beginning of the year, when you do the needs analysis, it's very important that you try and look at what aspects of the thematic units that are prescribed by the syllabus students would like to explore. And don't be afraid to change or incorporate sub-themes into thematic units if students show interest in particular areas. The sub-themes that can be incorporated can respond to something that is a general interest of the class, or even the interest of a few students who generally don't see themselves represented well in the curriculum. What these sub-themes do is they help us make these topics, they help us make the theme more concrete and allow the development of the content in a greater manner. So the first exercise you would do after you have the big idea and you have selected a theme for your thematic unit is looking at what aspects of that theme you would like to incorporate and which aspects of that theme would be most interesting to students. Remember that students need exposure to input of communicative language use. They need opportunities to use that input for communication, and also they need motivation to use the input. So those three conditions are essential for second language acquisition. If we don't comply with the three, right, the three, not two or one, the three, second language acquisition doesn't happen. Of course, there's a fourth desirable condition, which is the opportunity to focus on form. So when students ask you, how do you say it, teacher? Explain to me how to say it. There you provide the language at the point of need. As I said, they can be tied to students' interests, learning needs. And I again go back to lifestyles, which is a popular topic in syllabi. How about living in the developer world, city and country life, work life versus study life? Which one would you like and why? Advantages and disadvantages, as you see. So we have a big idea, we have a theme, we have sub-themes. What do we need to do now? Can you guess? Look at tasks and activities. Here is my checklist for you to select tasks and activities. The first thing is question yourself. What should learners be able to do with this sub-theme? Should they be able to write something? Should they be able to speak about something? Think in terms of functions and in terms of the different skills that are involved. Then go back to the functions. And when you look at the functions, each function may have different, what we call exponents. What is an exponent? For a function such as agreeing and disagreeing, oh, that's not a good example. For a function such as narrating, you may have narrating about the immediate past, narrating about the past that has been, that hasn't finished yet, that extends to the present, or speaking about something that happened before another moment in the past. So The exponents of a function are the potential grammatical configurations of that function. And remember, each function may have a multitude of grammatical forms. Choose the ones that you feel that students really need to be able to do what you have decided as a learning outcome. And once you have discussed that, you have discovered that, and you have put it down to paper, think about what are realistic and feasible tasks that all students, and not just the ones who study English privately, should be able to accomplish. How do you decide that? Well, first, think of this. This is a theme. The theme conveys some content. The content requires some vocabulary, right? So that is content obligatory language. If you want students to talk about a topic, they need to know the vocabulary. And you need to teach them the vocabulary, and they need to practice the vocabulary so that they can learn it. Additionally to the core vocabulary needed to talk about the topic, they also need some language to be able to put the vocabulary in meaningful chunks. So think about what language is needed. Then think of content-compatible language. What is content-compatible language? It's language for recognition, language that you don't necessarily want the students to master, but language that they can understand, right? And the idea is to make a very explicit list of language and vocabulary for each of these two categories. And then look at the emphasis you're giving to the thematic unit. Do you want the students to be able to hold a short dialogue in which they try to convince one another about going to the cinema? Well, how do we build to that? We can start by asking the students to make a list of the last 5 films that they have seen. They watch films on their cell phones, on TV. They may go to the cinema. Last 5 films. After they've done the list of 5 things, they compare with a partner, right? They concentrate on a film that on the films that the two of them have watched. And together, they must decide on which was the most interesting to the least interesting, right? And then, after they have discussed that, you need to be listening to this. You can get an idea of which is the most popular film in the class. And for next class, write a review of the film. You write it, and the review may contain a lot of factual mistakes. So if it is a short review, you may want to dictate it, right? And you can do a dictation where students listen to you dictating about the movie they chose as their favorite, and you make sure everybody has watched. And then when you say this movie starts a man and the star is a woman, they need to make the corrections, right? In this way, students are doing things, and then they can select their favorite film and write a review. In between the dictation and the writing of the review, you implement a writing sequence where you build the field, you deconstruct the text, you show the students how the text is constructed, you do collaborative construction of the text, and then independent construction of the text. As you can see, the important thing is that students are doing things, not that students are receiving input alone. In terms of activities, I would say what works best here is what Harmer calls a boomerang lesson. And we saw it last year, and you may have seen this, which is a way of talking about task-based learning. And then you may be thinking, okay, but how do I know if they have learned? Well, actually, you should decide on the assessment before deciding on the tasks, right? You should do diagnostic assessment at the beginning of every unit, new unit. And that means creating some sort of quiz, no grading, just diagnosis in terms of vocabulary, in terms of language, to find out what students already can do. And also about the content. So you do the diagnosis of content and language. Remember that this is exploratory, is not assessment for you to give a grade, right? And it's done before starting the unit. I generally like to think that one of the transitions between units, topics, could be particularly this, exploring the new topic with some sort of game-like quiz. The next is assessment for learning. An assessment for learning is assessment that is embedded in every learning activity, right? And for each thing that you do in the thematic unit, make sure you have an assessment for learning, task or activity to activate background knowledge, to help students monitor and evaluate their performance, maybe through exit tickets or peer and self-assessment. Make sure you provide feedback to learners after each activity or task, and that your feedback is given on two things: the content and the language. These feedback sessions are an opportunity for the learning of both. And then when you do activities, not tasks, but activities, kind of exercise-like, use the concept of demand high teaching, doing 3 times practice. How do you do practice? You correct an activity, you get the answers, and you discuss the correct and wrong answers with students. Then you ask students to put the activity away, and you do something that requires them to bring back from memory aspects of the activity, right? It could be factual things, it could be synonyms of words that they have learned during the activity, etc. And then the third time, right? And this is done like a conversation, right? After the activity has been corrected. The third time's practice has to do with bringing the content to the student, right? And personalizing it, asking personal questions, asking the students to share, etc. And of course, we are going to do assessment of learning because we need to give an account of what students have learned. How do we do that? I explained this already through two things: either a culminating task, like a project. For that project, you have to write very clear instructions, and you have to give the students the rubric you're going to use to correct the project that describes exactly what they need to be doing, right, ahead of time. Or you can do integrated performance assessment, which we're going to see how it is done if we have not seen it already. As you can see, the thematic unit can be planned slowly, but it does require some creativity on your part and some thinking. If you want to read more about this, as you can see there, this is the bibliography. I'm going to be sharing with you the chapter by Stoller and Grave in Schoology, and then you can just click on the links to get to the units. So in these 3 short videos, what we have done is looked at why thematic units are important, what are the components, the basic components, the skeleton of a thematic unit that has to do with the themes, the tasks, the topics, the transitions, the threads, the texts. And we've also looked at now how to do it. So I look forward to reading the thematic units that you will be creating, and then to watching you teach them. Goodbye.